When the Vietnam War first broke out, American military strategists believed they had discovered the perfect answer to the quandary of getting men and gear over hostile jungles: the helicopter. The idea was straightforward: rotorcraft could fly high and quickly, shooting troops over valleys and rice paddies before the opposition could respond. Theoretically, this mobility would protect them. But experience, as it so frequently does in war, proved tougher than theory. The instant a helicopter had to remain stationary, whether dropping soldiers into a landing zone or pulling out wounded from a firefight, that sleek edge was gone. A stationary helicopter became a slow, vulnerable target. And the Viet Cong very rarely let that opportunity slip. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The Vietnam experience compelled a radical reassessment of air warfare. Through desperation and ingenuity came the door gunners, ordinary soldiers who volunteered for perhaps the most lethal job in the entire war, and the improvised gunships that foreshadowed an entirely new class of military aircraft, the attack helicopter. When the American troops first landed in Southeast Asia, they introduced with them the Bell UH-1 Iroquois, a helicopter that quickly became one of the most iconic machines of the 20th century. To almost everyone who served, it was just the Huey. Initially, the Huey was used like a flying pickup truck. It transported infantry squads, ammunition, rations, and even cattle when necessary, flying low above emerald green rice paddies and dense jungle. The average Huey crew was a pilot, co-pilot, and crew chief. Their mission was straightforward but crucial: ferry supplies and troops across enemy terrain. The strategy, formulated in briefing rooms far from the front lines, was likewise straightforward: fly as fast as possible, stay high, and evasively dodge if needed. Vietnam had other ideas. The instant a Huey had to hover, dropping troops into landing zones, pulling the wounded out, they became sitting ducks. Viet Cong and North Vietnamese learned fast. With AK-47 rifles, heavy machine guns, and later anti-aircraft weapons, they made the sky a shooting gallery. The statistics reveal the magnitude of the destruction. During the war, the United States deployed close to 12,000 helicopters to Vietnam. More than 5,600 were destroyed. Of those, an estimated 2,700 were Hueys, about half of the total deployed. Clearly, something needed to change. The initial adjustment was rough but effective. Crews removed the cabin doors from the Huey and attached an M60 machine gun to a bungee cord. The crew chief, leaning out into the whirling wind, shot freehand into the woods, spewing suppressive fire to protect landings and takeoffs. It worked well, but only on one side. To get a balanced field of fire, a fourth man was added, first nicknamed the shotgun rider, but soon immortalized as the door gunner. Door gunners weren't issued, they volunteered. A few were motor pool mechanics, others cooks who were sick of peeling potatoes. They opted for adrenaline over routine, swapping relative safety for the dangerous privilege of riding shotgun on a flying death trap. Training was sparse. Door gunners had to be able to accomplish the impossible: strike mobile targets from a mobile platform, with only iron sights, intuition, and sheer nerve. They usually carried about 2,000 round stacks of heavy 7.62 mm ammunition, and each round counted. After takeoff, there were no reloads. But bullets weren't the only thing flying around. Door gunners themselves were vulnerable. They stood or knelt on the helicopter skids, held together by nothing more than a fragile harness. Flak jackets provided some shrapnel protection but none against rifle rounds cutting through the air. Ceramic chest plates were available but most gunners used them not. The plates weighed almost 15 pounds and inhibited movement, making survival out of a crash less probable. Speed, ferocity, and sheer volume of fire were usually the sole defenses. The risk was enormous. Of almost 4,900 helicopter crewmen who died in Vietnam, door gunners and crew chiefs comprised the largest group. In soldiers, a macabre joke circulated: a door gunner's life expectancy is 5 minutes. It wasn't necessarily true, but the irony expressed the truth. Door gunners were typically the first to fall, and often the first to die. Still, tales of incredible bravery were numerous. SP-4 Gary Wetzel's Huey was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade on January 8, 1968. The explosion almost blew his left arm off, which was subsequently amputated. Rather than falling, Wetzel wrapped his stump with the top of his shirt, returned to the skid, and continued to fire his M60 until all men on board were evacuated. He survived, and for this was awarded the Medal of Honor. His tale became a legend passed through helicopter squadrons, testimony that the door gunner's spirit was as indomitable as the steel they held to. Bravery, though, could not make up for design weaknesses. The Huey was designed to haul, not to combat. In an attempt to fill the gap, creative crews started adapting their aircraft into improvised gunships. The improvements arrived quickly. M60s that shot about 600 rounds per minute were replaced with electrically powered M134 miniguns that could spit out 3,000 rounds per minute, 50 a second. Under the nose, M5 grenade launchers were fitted, firing explosive rounds into tree limbs to blast an opening. On the sides, rocket pods were mounted, beginning with hasty racks of 24 folding fin rockets and eventually being replaced with M200 pods loaded with 19 Hydra 70 rockets apiece. A Huey fully loaded could now deliver merciless firepower, bursts of miniguns, grenade rain, and a hail of rockets in seconds. These armed-to-the-teeth variants, hogs, or frogs, led the unarmed, slick, troop carriers, clearing landing zones before troops stepped ashore. But this adaptation had its boundaries. Every new gun put on weight, reducing hover time to a mere 90 seconds before engines overheated and rotors lost lift. Worse yet, the Huey's broad, unarmed body continued to be an open target. Viet Cong gunners soon learned to target the rotor mast, a lone vulnerable spot that, hit, killed the aircraft. In spite of their vulnerability, the improvised Huey gunships performed satisfactorily to keep operations afloat. They enabled commanders to insert troops deep behind enemy lines in hours instead of days. General William Westmoreland, the highest-ranking U.S. commander, referred to helicopters as the most important tactical weapon introduced to the battlefield since the machine gun. But as the Huey gunships asserted themselves, commanders were aware of the obvious: attaching more guns to an assault helicopter was not a viable long-term solution. The Army required something that was specifically designed for combat. Bell Helicopter engineers got bold in 1965. Rather than modifying the Huey, they would create a helicopter from scratch for one reason: attack. They retained the Huey's trustworthy Lycoming engine and its tested two-blade rotor, but everything else was removed. The outcome was the Model 209, a slender, streamlined vehicle with tandem seating, the gunner in the lead, the pilot slightly higher astern. This arrangement cut down on drag, enhanced visibility, and offered a much smaller target. It entered service in 1967 as the AH-1 Cobra, the world's first purpose-built attack helicopter. The Cobra was quicker, reaching over 170 miles per hour. It had heavier ordnance on short wings, rocket pods, grenade launchers, and a nose-mounted turret capable of containing a minigun, grenade launcher, or both. Thin armor plates protected critical areas, and cockpit glass absorbed small arms fire. More significantly, its narrow profile and maneuverability made it difficult to strike. The Cobra soon acquired its nickname, the Snake. Late 1967 unit logs reflect a precipitous decline in helicopter losses as soon as Cobras escorted troop transports. They could loiter longer, cover several insertion waves, and jump from one firefight to another a mile apart. In short, they were precisely what the war had lacked. Cobra crews developed new tactics, such as hunter-killer teams. Low-flying, high-speed light OH-6 Loach scouts would get the bad guys to open fire. The Cobra orbiting overhead would then dive in with rockets and grenades. It worked, but it was deadly. Of the 1,400 Loaches produced, almost 1,000 were lost. Tales of courageous missions went around in a hurry. On June 18, 1968, First Lieutenant Larry Taylor took his Cobra into a desperate battle to save a four-man patrol. Once he had used up all his ammunition, he landed under fire and tied the troops to his skids, flying them out alive. Taylor was awarded the Medal of Honor years later, but his actions solidified the Cobra's reputation as a lifesaver as well as a killer. By the time the Vietnam War ended, Cobras had flown over 1 million combat hours, dispensing more firepower than all Huey gunships combined, and losing fewer aircraft. The Cobra had demonstrated the principle: a helicopter designed strictly for war could revolutionize warfare. But even before the conflict ended, U.S. planners were already thinking ahead, not to jungles, but to Europe.